St. Lucia's economic mainstay was apparent, yet hamstrung by limited airlift. Government needed to convince American Airlines to consider a direct flight into St. Lucia, save for one small problem. There was very little buzz about St. Lucia in the American marketplace. American Airlines executive Horace Horde suggested creating a high-profile event with resonance in key U.S. markets.
He practically said that this was a necessity. We needed to bump up the name of St. Lucia in the marketplace, and one of the quickest ways to do so, through his experience, was doing an event.
The internal champion of that proposal was Allen Chastanet, then director of the Saint Lucia Tourist Board. The uphill task of convincing his cabinet colleagues that Saint Lucia needed a jazz festival fell to the Minister for Tourism, Romanus Lancico, now deceased.
If he had said no to this, it wouldn't have happened because, as you know, the Tourist Board was completely financed by the government of St. Lucia.
He himself, Lancico himself, in Parliament and so on, got quite a bit of flack even from his own party. Everybody was not on board, as you would have thought by what they say today. It was a bit of a fight the first year.
So the festival, what it did was it provided a PR legs for us, and we were able to go to radio stations, go to ethnic groups, go to television stations, and all different types of media who would not have considered looking at St. Lucia in the past.
The idea was eventually green-lighted, but the public was skeptical.
It was very hard to convince St. Lucians that this was a good thing. But frankly, the focus was not on pleasing St. Lucia, but doing what was good for St. Lucia at the time.
People like Allen Chastanet also felt that we had to differentiate our product. We couldn't simply be sea and sand. And deceased Romanus Lancico bought into that we were doing something that would make Saint Lucia stand out. So that when you said the Saint Lucia Jazz Festival, the first thing you said is Saint Lucia.
Companies like Cable and Wireless, for example, they operate on an international stage, so they understood the value of this. The hotels as well, St. Lucia is not their market, so they know that to be out there internationally, you can't but do what's right.
Sunshine, blue seas, white sails, gentle breeze. Oh, there's something special in the air.
Come to American Airlines Caribbean.
American Airlines had just hosted a successful music festival in the British Virgin Islands. Horace Horde recommended that St. Lucia engage Paxton Baker of PKB Entertainment and Karen Joyner, who were involved in entertainment marketing.
Producing a festival of that magnitude required quite a lot of resources that we had to get from outside, lighting, even a simple thing as a stage, just all the production facilities that support it.
Fortunately, resident on island was musician Gene Lawrence, a former head of Trinidad and Tobago's Pan Jazz Festival.
I don't think St. Lucia had anybody who was involved in a festival of that nature before. So I became chairman.
We're here at the 2012 Soul Train Awards with Paxton Baker, the Executive Vice President and General Manager of Centric.
I must say Paxton Baker, in terms of the links that he had to the artist, that industry, he made a significant contribution.
He had his finger in the pie up there. He had done quite a lot of work with jazz festivals in other countries and other islands. And so he assisted us in getting the various artists together.
We were anxious all the time, and we would do checks and rechecks and spot checks. And then we got it down to a science that, 3 weeks in advance, this piece of equipment has to be in St. Lucia. 2 weeks before, these are the things that are required. So I think planning and project management was a skill that we had to learn, on our own.
We had a very large committee, actually, 19 of us, dealing with food and tents and different logistics for this site,
Realistically, we had no venue. And in fact, because we had no choice, Pigeon Island became a signature venue.
And although Pigeon Island was deemed the ideal venue for the inaugural Saint Lucia Jazz Festival, it lacked the infrastructure needed for an event of international standing.
The fact that there was no electricity, there was no water, there was nothing at Pigeon Island. It meant that every single day we had to plan. There was nothing that you could not have overlooked anything.
Hosting an international jazz festival was coming at significant cost. That would eventually be shared by government and major sponsors Cable and Wireless, with Keith Scompton, a jazz lover, as its point person. Horace Horde also convinced American Airlines to invest in the inaugural festival.
With these two big sponsors, it became possible.
The first notes of that inaugural show were struck by Joe Sample and Bobby Watson at the National Cultural Center. Day one on main stage featured Luther Francois and inaugural and the West Indies Jazz Band. Day two showcased Arturo Tapin, Tim Cunningham and Wynton Marsalis, but it was Tim Cunningham who perhaps created the biggest impact.
And he jumped down into the audience, you said, and could hear him perfectly still and wandered through the crowd. Oh, he had them in the thrills, man.
He did a really great set. I mean, he came back one other time, he was on the square, but that first time, it was just a really, really nice affair. And he came down off the stage, he spent a lot of time just playing in the crowd, sitting with different families and playing with them. And it was just a very, very pleasant feeling, the whole thing.
A few days later, Tim Cunningham would endorse Saint Lucia as a honeymoon destination by getting married in a simple garden ceremony at Le Toc Hotel. Absorbing all of this from a close vantage was Ronald Buhingson. Curiously, he had not yet found international acclaim, and his music was not yet Googleable. So his support that first year was as the board's liaison to road managers of the visiting artists.
The people who were on board, the non-Saint Lucians who were on board, didn't know I was a musician. I just never told them anything, because I just wanted to see this thing happen. So I was in charge of the roadies. They have to get out of my bed early in the morning, go pick up the guys, make sure they get there to set up everything. And I did that for like 2 years.
Luckily for us, BET came into the picture, and that was a major plus for us, you know.
And thankfully, with the support of American Airlines, we had access to key media. BET also was a key ingredient. The fact that they had a television station, the fact that they were able to access the right media channels, it really helped initially.
So interestingly enough, the first year that I came down for Saint Lucia Jazz, I didn't come to work. I came with one of the talent, Alex Buño. Now, I knew Paxton, and I told him if ever he needed help, let me know. So as it turned out, the guy that was supposed to be his production manager couldn't make it. So he called me 2 o'clock in the morning. I was staying at the Windjammer, I'll never forget. He said, yo, man, I'm going to need you first thing in the morning to give me a hand. We brought BT in to cover it. And after a couple of years, they got more involved in the whole festival, shooting it, promoting it, airing it. They offered Paxton a job. They bought his company and offered him a job, and he went in and became a senior executive.
The tourist board recognized the benefit of it, and I think then the powers that be at the time, the politicians then realized that this is a good thing, because the hotels were quite filled that first year.
I didn't sense anxiety, I got a lot of enthusiasm, because I think the response in the first year shocked everybody. It was so good that everybody had the sense we are onto something. And there was a lot of enthusiasm, there was a lot of energy, and there was a lot of goodwill.
In short time, the rest of the Caribbean took note. Regional attendance grew. Other Caribbean islands sought to emulate the Saint Lucia Jazz Festival.
It became almost fashionable to have an annual jazz festival.
Against the background of a successful and expanding jazz festival was a growing concern about the cost of the event, return on taxpayers' investments, and unequal allocation of resources to homegrown cultural events. It was a recurring discomfort for organizers.
And it was always a question at the back of people's minds, are we getting a return for that dollar? The second area of contention had to do with the spending on the jazz festival vis-a-vis spending on carnival.
The Saint Lucia Tourist Board responded by focusing on the development side of the festival. It introduced workshops which sought to connect the performing arts fraternities with visiting professionals. More St. Lucians appeared on festival stages island-wide, yet the lingering concerns over value for taxpayers' money and remuneration persisted.
I still don't think we have satisfactorily responded. And in my mind, I sometimes wonder whether there is a response. Because I ask myself, is it an either or? Is it a jazz or carnival? Couldn't we make it both?
Nice to meet you.
So I started back in 1995 as the research officer looking at the impact of the festival on St. Lucia.
The festival needed some new energy, and we had even considered changing to a blues and gospel festival at one stage, because as you probably know, blues and gospel are a really larger audience than jazz. But we didn't do that. It didn't happen.
You cannot be, there's something in Saint Lucia we call sans-hot. You know, you can't be so shameless that you claim you started the jazz festival.
According to Hilaire, the event and the Chastanet's influence died an ignominious death.
And then you feel it and you say, well, you know what? I'm the one behind all of this. How could you ever be the one behind it? You killed it. Well, you tried to kill it.